Now, little did I know that that decision would end up causing me to break my face and every bone in it that day. When I first saw myself in the mirror was pretty shocking. My whole face is metal now. Everything shattered. It's called like a burst fracture where everything just explodes. When they injected the morphine into me, my whole body tingled. I had pins and needles in my asshole. So following on from that story, I'd gone overseas, came back, thought we were kings of the world. And to this point, I was very much financially free, still living at home. And after I got back from that holiday, America, Europe, etc., I decided to have the gap year that I'd wanted to have for the last 6 months for osteo. It would have been my 5th year at university. It's 2015. And after not fights, but discussions with my mum, she was on my back to finish my degree, kind of knew that deep down I wouldn't ever pursue osteo with a passion. I still wanted to finish the degree. And this is a big lesson for anyone out there, to be honest. If we want to talk about uni, I could do a whole episode on this one, and I probably will eventually. But what I wanted to do in that year was to just hammer my match betting and to make as much money as I could and to essentially just don't do shit that I didn't want to do. I wanted to do some more travel, yada, yada, yada. But within a month of getting back from overseas, I was working at the Grand Prix and I did some casual shifts at the Grand Prix. I think I did it maybe 2 years before as well. I never really did that much work when I was younger, but I did do some work. I worked at the MCG doing merchandise for about a year, and then I did work at the tennis as well most years up until about 2019 maybe. And going back on topic, I worked at the Grand Prix. It was with a company where you just work 4 days, and I was a gate attendant. So all I did was literally let people in and out of a section of the stands, and that's what I did. So it was a Saturday, and I'd already worked Thursday and Friday, the qualifying. Saturday was also qualifying. And then what happened was, because I was such an impatient little kid, not much has changed with this these days when it comes to this specific topic with my patients, is I was sick of walking 1.5 kilometers or 1 kilometer to the sign-on point from my gate and back every day. So I thought, fuck this, I'm bringing a bike just so I can save myself 10 or 15 minutes by literally riding 3 minutes rather than walking 15. So to save myself about 12 minutes, I decided to bring my bike to the Grand Prix on that Saturday. Now, little did I know that that decision would end up causing me to break my face and every bone in it that day. So, long story short, grabbed my bike, put it in my car, drove my car to the station, then put my bike on the train, no problem. Got to Southern Cross Station, get off the train. Didn't bring a helmet because I wasn't planning on riding the bike through the city or to Albert Park. I was literally just trying to get on the tram with the bike, just ride the bike on that grass area to save myself 10 minutes. So I get to Southern Cross and I was told I wasn't allowed to bring the bike on the tram because there were too many people. Fair enough. So I then had to ride to Albert Park from Southern Cross. And because I didn't have a helmet, I wanted to stay off-road in case I got a fine. So I rode my bike through, got to Albert Park, and it got to this area where I could have gone on the road, on the actual road, I don't know what the road is, or I can go behind, which is behind the tram rail. And I decided to go behind. Now I got to this area near South Melbourne Market, and I saw this bit where it went downhill. I can put photos on the screen. Now I thought this was a ramp, right? I just thought it was a little ramp you could go down with the bike. I went down this ramp, about 30 meters long, built up some speed because it was downhill. And then at the very end of this ramp, what I thought was going to go down a ramp was actually 8 steps. And before I could do anything, I was over the top of my handlebars, smashed onto my face, and literally skidded, and my bike ended up fucking who knows where. I initially was in shock. I stood up, and as I stood up, all this blood just rushed out of my mouth, through my nose, everything. It was pretty crazy. And when I originally stood up, I'm like, all right, cool, I just hurt my face a bit, I'll just get back up and keep riding to work. And then I realized when the blood started coming out, I'm actually a bit in trouble here. Like, my initial thought was, like, I'd studied osteo and I knew a lot about the body. My initial thought was, fuck, that's a lot of blood. And I'd worked on dead bodies and things like that when I was with osteo. So my initial thought was like, shit, that is a lot of blood coming out of my nose and mouth. So that was the problem. So I sat back down, or I leant back down, and I also couldn't really speak because my lips were all fucked. I'd obviously bit my lip when I did it. And then all of a sudden, this person came out of nowhere. He was like an older guy. I think he potentially had a mental disability, but he called the ambulance, and while he was on the phone to the ambulance, he was calm, but it wasn't in a way where he was actually calm consciously. It was more just like, I don't think he realized how fucked my face was yet, because if there was that much blood there, like, someone should be in more shock. He was quite calm, which was weird. I could hear him talking to the ambulance, and they're like, oh, how old's the guy? And I'm like 22 at the time, right? And he's like 40. I'm like, bro, I'm not fucking 40. But like, I couldn't speak. I was like, I couldn't speak anything. I couldn't, like, my lips were fucked. Anyway, this other lady came with a pram, and I vaguely remember her, because I didn't get knocked out. I did not have any concussion. I was fully conscious the whole time. She grabs like a towel or something and like wipes the blood everywhere. And what I'd noticed now was my roof of my mouth was in half this way. So if you put a line through longitudinally through my head, front to back, the roof of my mouth was in half, literally split. My hard palate, that's what the bone is in half. And that's where the blood was coming from my nose through to my mouth. Within about 6 or 7 minutes, the ambulance had come. I got into the ambulance. I was still conscious, and what happened then was they started like touching my face. Obviously I was visually fucked, my face was a bit cooked, and they're saying things like clinically fractured mandible, which is like broken jaw, right? And they said something like bilateral, which is both sides. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I haven't broken my jaw, what the fuck? Like, that's not correct. And in my head, I'm like, nah, I'm fine, I just hurt my face a bit. And then I started to get a lot of pain, and that's when it started to probably realised that I'd done a fair bit of damage. And then they were going to give me morphine, because obviously I didn't ask for it. They just said, we're going to give you morphine. I'd never had morphine or anything like that before, and it was the weirdest feeling. I still remember it quite clearly. What happened when they injected the morphine into me was that my whole body tingled, like in the weirdest way. Like I had fucking pins and needles in my asshole. Not that you guys want to know that, but that's what I remember. Whatever. And then I think after that, I didn't go to sleep, but I obviously was much less alert. From then on, I went to the hospital. I remember going through the CT machine. Obviously, they were checking for any brain damage or any bleeding on the brain, fractures in the skull, things like that. Obviously, they're checking for all the fractures in my face. And after about an hour, I was put out into the ICU. And I remember within a couple of hours that my family had been notified. My best mate, Jackson, and Kiro also came within 2 or 3 hours. My dad, who's no longer with us, obviously passed away from MND back in 2021. He was always someone who was really bad with blood and gory shit. Like, he fully just can't deal with it. Like, he walks away, like he gets all weird. And he actually started crying as soon as he walked into the ICU, because my face was just unrecognizable. And I'll put the photos on the screen. And then I actually started to recover. The first couple of days when I first saw myself in the mirror was pretty shocking, to be honest. That was on night 1. In all of this, I was actually quite okay. Like, I wasn't in a heap of pain. Like, obviously I would have been on morphine and stuff, but I wasn't in too much pain. Now, a couple of days passed. Obviously, the nurses looking after me. I wasn't eating, wasn't able to drink that much through my face. I'd lost like a couple of kilos straight away. And what happened after that was, over the next week, I was going back and forth in scans and working out what they were going to do. And long story short, I spent 3 weeks in the Alfred Hospital. I honestly want to thank Alfred. They were so elite. Honestly, the surgeon who did my face is a weapon. She absolutely nailed it. I feel like I looked actually worse before my face. Now, I don't know, you probably wouldn't know that I had broken every bone in my face, like literally every bone. My whole face is metaled now. And I had 2 surgeries. So the first surgery was after a week. They cut my scalp and pulled it down. And now you can see that scar that's on the side of my head on both sides. And that's obviously to access some of the parts of the frontal bone, which is the bone here. I got metal here, and then they also accessed some of the sides up here of the orbit. And then they also cut underneath both my eyes, and my whole base of both of my eye sockets is fully titanium. And there's also 2 metal meshes at the base of my eye socket, which sit underneath my eyeballs now. So that's essentially what happened with my face. And then the second surgery happened a week later. They cut behind my jaw, and they plated my jaw on both sides. They then accessed inside my mouth. I had plates inside my mouth. I have plates in here. I have plates the whole eye socket, as I said, through my cheekbones. Everything shattered. It's called like a burst fracture, where everything just explodes. And the bones of the face are that strong, and I'm not a fucking facial expert, but the aim of the facial bones is to basically protect everything behind that, which is like your vital organs inside, like your brain. Not so much your brain, that's your skull, but it still does protect your brain because it's there. Your eyes, your deep sinuses and things like that, and the vessels inside there. But every bit of that impact of me falling flat on my face went through my bones, and they just went pfft, and that's why I didn't get concussed. None of my brain was affected, nothing like that. After the first surgery, I actually lost the ability to make any facial expressions. So going back to my neurology study, I know this is from the facial nerve. So they obviously clipped my facial nerve, and for about a month, I had lack of ability to actually make any facial expression. So I couldn't smile, couldn't frown, couldn't raise my eyebrows, couldn't do anything like that because they must have snipped my facial nerve on by accident through the surgery, and then it obviously grew back over time, and now it's fine. And I don't really have any long-lasting effects. The only thing I do have is whenever I put sometimes fruit or food in my mouth after I haven't eaten for an hour or two, there will be some kind of pain with my saliva glands. I don't know what this is. It's a weird sensation. But apart from that, I've got nothing. I had one other surgery to remove plates from here because this was too tight about 2 years later. But apart from that, pretty lucky to get through that. Anyway, long story there. What happened after that was I was going to have my gap year, and then that just confirmed it. I also wanted to shout out Nick Dalsano and Ben Jacobs. When I was in hospital, they came to visit me on the day before I was about to leave, and I literally genuinely looked like the Elephant Man, and these boys were both cool enough to come down. I think one of my mates organised it, being a Mad North Melbourne supporter at the time. Basically, they came. Ben Jacobs was funny because he said something about like, you're leaving the hospital tonight, hopefully there's no stairs or something, taking the piss out of me falling downstairs with the bike. And I'm like, mate, that's way too soon. But it was quite funny. I actually taught them what match betting was in the hospital. And funnily enough, in the hospital, obviously I had a lot of people visit me, but during the time that obviously there wasn't anyone there, I was still doing shit on my laptop. I got my parents to bring in my laptop, and I actually made about $3,000 match betting while I was in that hospital. It was early March. I think it was round 1 or 2 of the AFL and NRL season, and a lot of those early promos back then, early payout promos were thrown out in the first couple of rounds especially, and I was kind of hammering those and definitely collected some money while I was in hospital, which was pretty cool. And I remember explaining to Nick Dalsano and Ben Jacobs. Nick Dalsano was quite interested in what I was doing when I was there, explaining to them what I do. But yeah, that was it. So I will leave it there, and we'll move on to the next part, which will be part 3 in the next episode. But yeah, that was my story about wanting to basically have a gap year, and then I was forced to have a gap year by the end of it due to breaking my face. I broke every bone in my face, filled with titanium now, had that gap year, and I'll explain what I did over the next 3 years, which brought me to starting the business that we now run. But yeah, that's episode 2. If you do like this stuff and you want to hear more about me, building some context to explain where I am now, and then you can kind of get a bit more of an understanding of where I came from, and then we can get into the good stuff once we pass all this contextual stuff. And make sure you send this to someone if you find it interesting. Cheers.